So first of all, welcome everyone to the first of our webinar series on the Recruitment of Policy Leaders 2022-2023 recruitment campaign. This is the first in a series of webinars we will be hosting to provide information and provide the opportunity to ask questions and learn more about the RPL program and the recruitment campaign. My name is Jason Morris-Jung. I'm a manager at the Indigenous Services Canada, where I work on climate change and Indigenous issues. And I joined I joined government through the RPL in 2019. I would also like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe, also known as Ottawa. It's always a privilege and an honor for me to say so, and especially now in this beautiful time of year where Ottawa is full of autumn colors. It's really gorgeous. So very much to be speaking to you from this beautiful part of the country, and I encourage you all to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the different Indigenous territories upon which you are currently sitting or standing, or whatever the case may be. Very quickly, I will go through a few protocols for participants. You are currently on mute and off camera. When we do get into questions, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. You can also post in the chat, which I will be monitoring, and I can also raise questions on your behalf if you prefer that. You can see the chat button in the bottom or the top. If you press the three dots in the bottom right-hand corner, you will find the chat function there. I would also like to note that we are recording this session for internal purposes and largely for the introduction session, which the introduction presentation, which we intend to post on YouTube. For the format, we will start with an introductory presentation on the RPL program by our panelists, and that will be followed by a quick introduction to the panelists and a general discussion where we'll have opportunities for you, the audience, to raise questions and have them addressed by the panelists. I will note this session is in English, mais j'invite tout le monde de parler soit en anglais ou français si vous le désirez. Je note también, sorry, a bit of Spanish in there. Je note aussi qu'on a une session en français ce vendredi à midi pour ceux qui veulent assister à la présentation en français. This session will be approximately 1 hour. Before we go into the presentation, I will quickly introduce the panelists. We have, who you should be able to see on screen. We have Allegra Frixell, who's a senior policy analyst at Global Affairs Canada in the strategic policy branch. She joined the public service in February 2022 after working, oh no, my lights. Sorry, I'm thinking, that might be a problem here. Who worked as I'm in the government 2.0 office here, co-working space. After working as an academic historian at universities in Europe and Israel, she started working initially in a dynamic team at the Women and Gender Equality Canada, also known as WAGE, on gender-based analysis, which gave her a bird's eye view of diversity and inclusion work across the federal government, and later moved to working more closely on strategic policy files. She's originally from Southwestern Ontario and had never lived in Ottawa before this year. Philip Roseberry is a senior investment officer in the Investment Review Division of Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada, also known as ISED. His work involves reviewing foreign investment in Canada from both an economic and national security angle. The job is a fascinating one as it involves legal, economic, political, and security-related questions that can have long-term impacts on Canada. Philippe joined the federal government in 2017 as part of the RPL and has held policy, regulatory, operational positions at 4 departments. He has a PhD in comparative politics from Queen's University and is originally from Quebec City, or at least very near, right, Philippe? And Nicholas Westerly, who is the Director of Strategic Policy at the Treasury Board of Canada and is also a longtime RPLer. And I will actually get him to say more about himself when we get to the panel discussion. So as you can see, RPL are involved in many different areas in government, across government, and we will speak a bit more about this as we get into our presentation and discussion. So welcome to the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your time and your experiences today. I will now put up the slides and hand it over. I believe, Nick, you're starting.
Yep.
Okay, just give me one moment. Share my screen. And I will put it into slide mode. Okay. Panel, so you can see the screen all right for the slides? Okay, please go ahead, Nick.
Hey, everyone. So I think Allegra and I will go through the presentation fairly quickly, both because it's short and because a lot of it is information you can probably look up. We're happy to answer questions about it afterwards as well, but we're conscious, I think a lot of the value of this kind of session is hearing from us about our experiences more so than the things we look for. But happy to talk about whatever is useful for you in this session. And that really is the point, is to be as helpful as possible to you and give you a sense for the program and how it works. So feel free to steer us with your questions. So if you want to go to the next slide, Jason. You were probably already thinking about applying to government. So I don't know if I need to sell you on this, but a couple of the benefits for joining the federal public service: it is an enormously flexible employer. The federal government's the largest employer in Canada, 250,000 employees by one definition. I work at the Treasury Board Secretary. We argue about these definitions frequently. It might be 360,000 depending on who you're counting. It's a lot of people either way. And it's very mobile within that organization. I've worked on labor issues and innovation on labor regulation. I've worked on measuring impact in the government of Canada. I now work on the future of the public service as an organization and good management of the public service. And you can move between departments and between subject matter areas with considerable flexibility, which I think for a lot of us is a huge perk. It's a great employer. It's good benefits. It's good, I would say, treatment generally. It is still thinking about what flexible work arrangements looks like in the context of returning to the office, or not flexible work arrangements, but I would say the government's typically an excellent employer. And though it isn't always the case, there's the opportunity for really exciting work with a huge impact for Canadians. I would probably say this in the answer to a question later anyway, but I certainly spent some of my time fulfilling the stereotype of a government employee, filling out paperwork that I'm not sure anyone reads, writing reports I don't think anyone reads, otherwise doing useless work. But I also spend some of my time doing this phenomenally exciting work that I don't think I could do with any other organization. The scale and scope for impact on Canadians is simply incomparable, in my view, to any other organization in Canada. And you sit in some of these rooms with a chance to influence the lives of Canadians in a very concrete, meaningful way. And I at least find it really exciting. Next slide, Jason. So what is RPL? It's an annual recruitment program of the federal government. It's not the only one. There are a range of them. You may have heard of the Advanced Policy Analyst Program, for example. D&D has a dedicated recruitment one. Natural Resources Canada is dedicated. So you may realize that RPL is not what you're looking for, and one of those other programs is better fit. Totally fine with us. Makes total sense. Find the best fit for you. RPL's niche is often sort of mid-career individuals, or individuals who've been working for a while or done a PhD or have a few experience of some kind, who can bring that experience to the public service. And we look for exceptional people of almost any background, and then try to help place them in places where they can really lead policy thinking in the government of Canada. And it's enormously wide. I have interviewed and admitted, the one that is most memorable for me is a former professional ballet dancer who also happened to have then done a PhD on arts and arts policy and joined the public service. There's an enormous range of backgrounds, but we're looking for people who can really lead policy thinking. We bring people in at a mid to senior level, and I think this is actually the next slide, if you go ahead again, Jason. And so we're looking for people who can lead that thinking and lead policy work in the government of Canada. So we recognize existing talent and experience. We start you at a more senior level than other postgraduate recruitment programs. But Other ones have other arguments to them. So if you're coming out of a master's degree, for example, and would like to do 6 months at each of the 3 central agencies, the Advanced Policy Analyst program does that. And so it's a very different experience than RPL, but not necessarily, it's just different, not better or worse. If you get into RPL, you get paired with a mentor who can help you explore career options. So we pair you with someone who came in through RPL and can talk to you about what might be a good fit for you, what are some good teams, what might be suitable, and it really help pair you with somewhere that you'll flourish and that they can really benefit from your expertise. And then we have a network of RPL alumni throughout your career as well. There's several hundred of us in government. We talk to each other. We have a newsletter. We're great. I say this on behalf of all 3 panelists. All of us are excellent. Jason's not a panelist, I suppose. He's excellent too. But it's a great community. And so I think there are a lot of perks to applying to RPL. I will also say RPL is remarkably competitive. I applied twice. I did not get in the first time. I look at the numbers and it is an amazingly competitive thing to apply to. And so even enormously well-qualified people don't qualify each year. It is not a slight against you or your accomplishments. It's simply an extremely competitive program. Next slide, Jason. So what do we look for? All fields and backgrounds. We're looking for people with policy experience, but what that looks like will vary based on your background. The type of policy experience someone who's just finishing or did a PhD in engineering will be very different than someone who did a PhD in public policy or a PhD in arts or a PhD in economics. And that's fine. A very wide range of backgrounds. You qualify for immediate hiring, but can also choose to wait for a year or 2. So we have some people who continue in their current activity, whatever that is, for a year or 2 before joining the government of Canada. That's fine. We assign you a mentor to help you think through where you might want to go in the public service. And then we set up meetings with managers, with hiring managers to help you find where might be the best fit. And the goal really is to find where would you flourish the most and where is the, where can the public service use you best? And I'm from BC originally. I think I'd been to Ottawa before I joined the public service, but I certainly hadn't spent much time here. I could not have told you what most departments did before I joined. I really didn't think about the federal government very much. The process of having a mentor is enormously helpful. The federal government is a, frankly, black box for many outsiders. It's hard to know what different departments do. Most of the policy jobs all seem to have roughly the same titles. You're like a senior advisor for strategic policy. There's no non-strategic teams for some reason. A mentor really helps you figure out what do these teams actually do, and is it something you would want to do, which is really part of the value add we try to offer to successful candidates. And with that, I will turn it over to Allegra.
All right, thanks, Nick. So in terms of eligibility, I think we've had several questions already come in, so I hope that the next couple of slides clears up some of those questions that you've been asking. So in terms of education, you must have a master's degree or a PhD or a law degree combined with another undergraduate degree in any discipline, but that doesn't mean that you need to have a PhD or that doctorate degrees are weighted more than other degrees. We're simply listing the kind of additional postgraduate degrees that we're looking for or screening for in the initial stages. Secondly, you need to have policy relevant experience. So experience that is relevant to policy, public policy that you've acquired through a role in something like an NGO or think tank, government, academia, consulting, the private sector, etc. And what matters most to us here is to demonstrate how that prior experience is relevant to policy and allowed you to gain an in-depth knowledge of policy issues as well as develop policy recommendations. This also includes experience interacting with government policies and programs. So someone who may have significant experience navigating social programs from personal or lived experience, for example. So not always the kind of formal experience of being in an NGO or think tank world, for example. Thirdly, we're looking for leadership or initiative. So evidence of leadership and service through extracurricular activities and volunteer initiatives in communities or academic organizations. And this can also include instances where you may have made significant contributions to the well-being of others or overcame adversity to realize a positive change or deliver results. So again, this can be something that's maybe less formalized. So overcoming a significant personal challenge or adversity and achieving positive change in the community or realizing a personal accomplishment, for example. Fourthly, we're looking for academic or research achievements. So a record of significant achievements in academic or in other research contexts. Through scholarships or publications, as well as in non-academic contexts. So developing analyses, reports, research tools, data sets, IP, new technologies, products, or innovations that have been used by a variety of organizations, whether those are research-based or more industry, community, or public or nonprofit or indigenous. So I hope you're seeing the kind of theme here, but you don't just have to have a kind of traditional academic background. So in this category, and a consultant who may have drafted high impact reports, an investigative journalist who's published high impact articles, or a product developer who has developed high impact products on their own or as an employee of a company are all very relevant examples that would meet the criteria that we're looking for under these eligibility frameworks. And then if you look at the box on the right, we are testing or assessing some competencies throughout the different steps of the recruitment process, which I will get to in the next slide. This list isn't exhaustive, but it gives you an idea of some of the knowledge and skills that we're looking for. So knowledge of Canadian policy, your analytical thinking and judgment, creative problem solving, communication, interpersonal relations, and ethics and values, which are very important within the public service. One final note on this slide before we talk about the recruitment process in further detail is that all Canadians, permanent residents, and persons residing in Canada can apply, but preference is given to veterans first, followed by Canadian citizens and permanent residents, except for positions in Nunavut where Inuit must be nominated first. Typically in the past, the RPL pool is usually filled by Canadian citizens and permanent residents, but you're still welcome to apply. However, do let us know if your status changes throughout the process. Okay, so we'll switch to the next slide and look at recruitment or the evaluation process. So we start with the screening of applications. And so for that initial application, you need to respond to the pre-selection questions to indicate how you meet each of the required criteria that I just discussed: policy experience, leadership and initiative, and academic or research achievement. Screeners do not look at your CV in detail. So we ask that you highlight and very clearly demonstrate to us how you meet each of those essential criteria in your answers. And more information about the application form itself and advice on how to fill it will be posted online closer to the campaign opening date. So if you have questions about that, just wait for that information to come. The second step is a written exam that takes place in the winter, usually in January. The format of this year's exam is still being finalized, and there's no need to have prior knowledge of the structure of government briefing notes, since all the information that you will need to complete the assignment will be provided to you or to candidates who are invited to write the exam. The third stage is an interview stage. And here I would flag that RPL interviews are very unique. The interview has a very dynamic pace where you can expect to discuss a broad range of policy issues with a panel that includes senior executives within the public service. So someone at the assistant deputy minister's level, as well as RPL alumni. We also will challenge and question your ideas in that interview. So the goal is to have a kind of dynamic and challenging policy discussion rather than a discussion, say, about your CV, for example. And then finally, if you've passed through all of those stages, the application stage, the written exam, the interview, then references that you provide will be contacted to just provide some additional information on certain skills. So those are the 4 steps. It takes several months, so plan ahead if you are thinking about applying in November and December when the application opens, that you will not find out the outcome potentially for several months, and also start quite late in the following year, not immediately upon applying in November or December. So that summarizes the application. Before you go to the next slide, we do also have slightly different application periods, which I'm going to speak to next. So we go to the next slide. The government of Canada is really committed to making the public service more reflective of the Canadian public that it serves. And RPL is taking significant steps towards helping build a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive federal public service, which is something that I've actually worked on in my experience in my domestic department here. So we encourage you to self-declare on your application if you belong to one or more employment equity groups. Since we appreciate the important perspectives that these underrepresented groups bring to policy leadership in Canada. And this process, the self-declaration, is voluntary and confidential, but it just really helps provide data that removes barriers to employment, and it's something that's important to us. So please do self-declare if you feel comfortable doing so. And then moving to the next slide. In line with this commitment to diversity and inclusion, RPL is actively seeking applications from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis candidates, as well as persons living with a disability. So to encourage and support applications from these peoples, as well as from persons living with disabilities, the campaign this year will include additional application periods after the general campaign closes for candidates self-identifying as Indigenous and candidates self-identifying as a person living with a disability. These candidates are invited to apply through either the general campaign, and you'll see the dates on the right-hand side there, or through the additional application window. So there's no penalty for doing any of the different campaigns. If you self-identify, then please feel free to choose the one that is most convenient for you. But note that you should apply through only one window. So if you apply through the general campaign, then please do not submit another application through the dedicated campaigns for Indigenous candidates or persons with disabilities, because you won't be able to apply again through that second window. So the stream, in terms of the additional campaigns, will provide additional time for the federal government to maximize its efforts to recruit candidates among Indigenous peoples and persons living with a disability, which is why we have extended timeframes this year. Okay, and then final slide, and then we'll get to your questions. So just to reiterate next point, the RPL program is very competitive. We usually receive around 3,000 applications every year, and approximately only 10% of applicants make it to the written exam. 2 to 3% are shortlisted for an interview, and 1 to 2% successfully qualify in the program. So out of 3,000 applicants, only 1 or 2 make it into the RPL pool. So we invite you to self-assess whether you'd be a good fit for the program and whether you meet all of the required criteria. So just to give you an example, a candidate that might have an exceptional academic career and relevant experience, but limited volunteering or community involvement might be unlikely to make it past the screening stage because they don't meet all of the criteria that we're looking for in that initial application. So again, to underscore, when you are applying, be sure to clearly explain how you meet each criteria and provide the necessary information for the screeners to be able to assess elements that they may not be familiar with. So for example, if you received a specialized research grant or very competitive scholarship that may not be well known outside of your field or your community, provide details on that granting body, the selection process, and the competitiveness of that award so that it's very clear for us. And if you would like to learn more or discover different recruit profiles or participate in other Q&A sessions, including on how to prepare your application, then please follow us on our various pages, as you see on this slide here. We've got the RPL account on Twitter. You can bookmark our GC Wiki page, which is publicly accessible. And you can also register for live webinars on Zoom and find links to our other platforms there as well, and our soon to be launched YouTube channel. Thank you.